The planet Valhallis had been known across the galaxy for one undeniable truth: it was the most hostile world in existence. A death world in every sense of the word. Its environment was not just unforgiving, it was actively designed to obliterate all but the most resilient species. What little of the atmosphere there was churned with toxic gases and constant electrical storms. A thick layer of clouds perpetually obscured the sun, casting the planet in perpetual twilight. The ground itself was a patchwork of jagged canyons, razor-sharp rock formations, and vast, molten plains that threatened to swallow anything daring enough to step too close. Here, nothing thrived unless it had evolved to be lethal in some way. Yet, in the midst of this living nightmare, Valhallis had given birth to some of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Monsters, each more fearsome than the last. The largest and most terrifying of these were the Vraziks, a reptilian species with armored hides capable of repelling the deadliest of energy weapons. The Vraziks were relentless predators, hunters of the highest order, able to track prey across hundreds of miles of wasteland with almost supernatural precision. Then there were the Kyre, massive, subterranean creatures whose mere footsteps caused the ground to tremble as they tunneled below the surface, swallowing entire settlements whole. Humans had arrived on Valhallis several centuries ago, seeking to explore its mysteries. The first attempts were catastrophic, expeditions that simply disappeared, leaving nothing but mangled remains. Most who came to study Valhallis were either killed by the planet itself or hunted by the native creatures. Yet, over time, the humans who survived began to understand something crucial: the creatures of Valhallis were not mere beasts. They were the product of an ancient and incredibly complex evolutionary process, each one an apex predator in its own right, but each one could be understood. The early human scientists were forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about biology and behavior. The predatory creatures of Valhallis, it seemed, were not mindless killing machines. They were adaptable, intelligent, and most surprisingly social. They had complex communication systems, territorial instincts, and even the capacity for rudimentary emotional bonds. To tame the monsters of Valhallis was not simply a question of overpowering them, it was a question of understanding their needs, desires, and limitations. The creatures were not unreasoning savages, they were simply creatures of necessity, shaped by the extreme conditions of their world. The humans began their work cautiously. They studied the creatures from a distance, using advanced surveillance technology and drones to collect data on their behavior. It was the first step in a long process of interaction, an effort to learn the language of these monsters. Humans didn't begin with force, they began with observation. They studied the way the Vraziks communicated with one another through subsonic vibrations in the air. They mapped the migratory patterns of the Kyre, understanding where they hunted and why. Slowly, over decades, the humans began to see patterns emerge. The monsters, terrifying as they were, had a logic to their actions. When humanity finally began to experiment with direct interaction, it was a calculated risk. The first experiment involved a small, seemingly harmless creature called a Volg, a six-legged, armored arthropod known for its ability to release poisonous spores when threatened. The humans, using specialized suits, approached one of these creatures with food and non-threatening gestures. Over time, the Volg grew accustomed to the humans' presence, allowing them to interact with it without provoking an attack. The success of this experiment laid the groundwork for what would come next: the slow, difficult process of building trust with the planet's apex predators. But the true breakthrough came when a human team made contact with the Vraziks. The Vraziks, a creature once thought to be an unstoppable killing machine, responded to the humans' attempts at communication with an unexpected gesture. It did not attack. Instead, it paused, its golden eyes studying the humans with an intelligence that was almost curious. It was the first time in history that a human had made direct eye contact with the Vraziks without being torn apart. It wasn't a moment of triumph, it was the beginning of something far more complex. Over the next several years, humanity learned how to form tenuous, fragile bonds with the creatures. They learned to communicate, not through force, but through patience and understanding. At first, the Vraziks did not trust their human counterparts. But through careful, respectful interaction, the humans proved themselves to be more than just another predator. They were students, scientists, and above all, survivors. Over time, they became accepted into the Vrazix's territory, allowed to observe their rituals, their hunts, and their social structures. This was the first step toward the impossible dream, taming the monsters of Valhallis. The next challenge was far greater. Humans had learned to coexist with the Vrazix, but now they needed to tame them. This was not a question of breaking the creatures' wills, it was a question of forging partnerships. With the Vrazix, there were no chains, no cages. Instead, humans worked to form mutual relationships. The taming process involved recognizing the creature's need for respect and understanding its behavioral cues. There were moments of near disaster, where a single misstep or a misread signal could have resulted in fatal consequences. Yet humanity adapted. They learned to read the subsonic vibrations in the Vrazix's roars, the subtle shifts in its posture that indicated aggression or submission. Each victory was hard-won, each success a testament to the growing bond between humans and monsters. The success was not limited to the Vrazix alone. Over the course of the next century, humanity began to forge partnerships with other species on Valhallis, including the Kyre, the Thalrox, and even the seemingly invincible Nixii, an alien species that could manipulate gravitational fields. Humanity didn't just survive on Valhallis. They thrived, using the creatures as partners in their exploration of the planet, and even in their efforts to terraform the hostile world. The most astonishing development was the creation of the Warborn, genetically enhanced humans who had bonded so closely with the monsters of Valhallis that they could interface directly with them. These Warborn could communicate with their monstrous partners using both verbal and nonverbal cues, sharing thoughts and emotions in a way that transcended simple speech. The Warborn were not just soldiers, they were the living embodiment of the union between humanity and the monsters of Valhallis, a testament to the unique way in which humans had conquered the planet. The galaxy would come to know Valhallis as the birthplace of the most remarkable species of all, humans. For in a world that had created monsters, humanity had found a way to tame them all, turning the Deathworld into something new, a world where even the most fearsome creatures could be partners, allies, and friends. It was a quiet victory, a victory not through brute force, but through understanding. And it would change the course of galactic history forever. Humanity had known fear when they first discovered Valhallis. But what they learned from the planet, what they had been able to accomplish, was nothing short of miraculous. It began with the first expeditions, the teams sent to map the planet's surface, to study its extreme environment, and the creatures that called it home. The initial missions were a disaster. The explorers were slaughtered by massive predatory beasts that seemed to be made of pure aggression. The indigenous fauna of Valhallis didn't simply kill out of hunger. They killed because they could, because they were hardwired to be unstoppable. The Skydyrants, a breed of flying carnivores with wingspans of over 20 meters, were the stuff of nightmare, while the massive, subterranean burrow beasts made quick work of any exploration team unfortunate enough to cross their paths. Yet, the humans did not retreat in fear. They adapted. They learned. The Federation had one thing that no other species in the galaxy seemed to possess in such abundance: persistence. Humanity's survival instinct was not merely driven by a desire to live, it was shaped by the need to understand, to conquer, and ultimately to tame. Valhallis had no shortage of danger, but it also offered an invaluable resource: its monsters, the perfect testbed for human ingenuity. Over time, humans did not simply survive the world, they began to learn the patterns, the behaviors, the weaknesses of these deadly creatures. The deadly burrow beasts, which had once terrorized exploration teams, were eventually understood. Their reliance on vibration to track prey was used against them. By using silent, magnetic drones, humans were able to map out their dens and catch them at their weakest. It was not a quick process, nor an easy one. But over decades, humanity perfected the art of not only surviving but thriving on Valhallis. The Federation began to build settlements on the most dangerous stretches of the planet, with new colonies emerging amidst the hostile terrain. Researchers, engineers, and soldiers worked in unison to devise ways to harness the deadly monsters of Valhallas. They built structures designed to withstand the harshest conditions, with magnetic fields that repelled flying creatures, and fortified walls that stood against the ground-shaking stampedes of enormous herbivores. Most importantly, they studied the monsters, not just their biology but their psychology. It was a long-term investment, and it required something the Federation excelled at: patience. Taming the creatures of Valhallas would not happen overnight, but humanity was willing to wait. And soon enough, a breakthrough occurred. They discovered that many of the planet's most aggressive creatures were not mindless killing machines. They were survivors, shaped by their harsh environment into formidable opponents, but with a deeply ingrained need for order, hierarchy, and territory. This realization marked the first real shift in human understanding of Valhallas monsters. The human approach to taming the creatures was methodical. The first success came with the trilbeasts, massive, six-legged predators that moved like land sharks through the ash-choked plains. They were apex predators, with claws capable of ripping through reinforced steel, but they had a weakness: their social structure. Each pack of trilbeasts was led by an alpha, and once that alpha was taken down, the pack was disoriented, prone to confusion, and easy to manipulate. A team of human biologists and behaviorists worked for years to perfect a form of subjugation through non-lethal means, using pheromone-based communication and carefully designed tools to introduce dominance hierarchies within the packs. It took a decade, but eventually, humans had managed to domesticate the trilbeasts, turning them from ruthless predators into loyal and protective companions. From there, the successes began to stack up. The Windrippers, once thought to be untamable, were made to serve as scouts for human colonies. These enormous, winged beasts had wingspans larger than some spaceships, but their loyalty could be bought with a mix of trust and well-timed feeding rituals. The larger and more dangerous the creature, the more elaborate the taming process became. Some of these creatures could only be subdued through careful neurological conditioning, while others required an intricate understanding of Valhallas' harsh ecosystem and the complex food chains within it. With each new creature that fell under human control, the Federation's hold on the planet strengthened. The true breakthrough came with the largest and most terrifying of all Valhallas creatures, the WIRM dragons. These titanic beasts, capable of tearing entire mountain ranges apart with their flame-breathing jaws, were the final frontier of human taming efforts. For years, they were thought to be beyond reach, too powerful, too intelligent, too unpredictable. But, in a final daring experiment, a human team succeeded in breaking their wild instincts by manipulating the WIRM dragon's nesting patterns. It was a gamble, but the result was staggering. The Federation now had creatures capable of controlling entire regions, creatures that could be used for a multitude of purposes, as transport, as weapons, or as guardians of human settlements. It was an extraordinary achievement. A world that had once been known only for its brutality, its unyielding hostility, had now been bent to the will of humanity. Valhallas was no longer a place to fear, it had become a symbol of human ingenuity and determination. The monsters that once ruled the planet were now allies, integrated into every facet of human life on Valhallas. The Federation, once an outsider in this violent world, had now become its dominant force, controlling both the planet's creatures and the land they inhabited. Humans had tamed the Deathworld. But the question that lingered in the background was this: had Valhallas changed humanity, or had humanity changed Valhallas? The monsters were no longer just creatures of brute force, they had become part of the human ecosystem. They were used as tools, companions, and sometimes even as sentinels. Valhallas had transformed from a world that created monsters into one where humans had not only learned to survive but to flourish alongside them. It wasn't just that humans had tamed the beasts, they had adapted to the Deathworld itself, bending it to their will. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of, overcoming insurmountable odds, creating order out of chaos, and conquering a planet that had once seemed impossible to survive on. It was a new chapter in human history. Valhallas had become humanity's proving ground, the place where their strength, intelligence, and willpower were tested and ultimately emerged victorious. And now, As the Federation looked out across the planet, one thing was clear: no force in the galaxy could stand against humanity when they were driven to conquer. The breakthrough came not through brute force, but through understanding. Unlike the rest of the galaxy's species, humans approached the monsters of Valhallas with a methodical determination. Instead of simply trying to subdue them through weapons or technology, humanity sought to understand the creatures, how they thought, how they moved, how they survived. They studied their biology, their instincts, and their social behaviors. Humans had a unique advantage. They possessed an unparalleled capacity for empathy and adaptability, traits that no other species had managed to develop on Valhallas. It was during one of these early expeditions, under the leadership of Dr. Irina Atherstone, that the first successful interaction with a Valhallas beast occurred. The creature, a towering behemoth known as the Thundermaw, stood over 30 feet tall, its jaws capable of crushing a tank in one bite. It had been a silent sentinel, moving through the dense fog of the lowlands, stalking anything foolish enough to enter its territory. Despite its terrifying appearance, Dr. Atherstone and her team realized something unexpected. The Thundermaw, though a solitary predator, exhibited a peculiar pattern. It did not immediately attack when the humans made themselves visible. Instead, it watched them, studied them. For days, Dr. Atherstone's team did not provoke it. They simply observed from a distance, careful not to make any aggressive moves. They noted the creature's behavior, how it paused before striking, how it circled around potential threats before making a decision. They realized it wasn't simply a mindless beast. It was a predator with reasoning capabilities, operating on an intelligence humans could communicate with. Dr. Atherstone's breakthrough wasn't immediate, but it was transformative. After a tense week of waiting, she made her move. Using a combination of pheromones and vocal tones that humans had learned to replicate from the local fauna, she offered an olive branch, a gesture of non-hostility. The Thundermaw, after a few moments of hesitation, approached. It was the first sign that there was more to these monsters than instinct. The creature sniffed the air, then, as though understanding, nudged the human team with its massive head, as if acknowledging their presence without attacking. That moment marked the beginning of a new era for humanity on Valhallas. Word spread across the Federation: the monsters could be understood. The creatures that had once been the embodiment of terror could be approached, studied, and, eventually, tamed. What began with the Thundermaw spread quickly to other species, the blood-talon raptors, which were once considered too ferocious to be handled, the massive stone shields, who could be trained to carry heavy loads, and even the seemingly invincible fire spitters, whose flamethrower-like abilities were put to use in energy harvesting. Over the next several decades, humanity didn't just survive on Valhallas, they thrived. The creatures of the Deathworld, once thought to be the ultimate predators, became invaluable allies. Humans developed new ways to coexist with them, using the creatures for everything from construction to transportation. Entire settlements began to rely on their tame beasts for daily survival, integrating them into the fabric of their society. However, this success did not come without a price. The creatures were not easy to control, and even the most well-trained of beasts could turn violent if they sensed weakness. To maintain control, the humans needed to constantly evolve, to refine their techniques and technologies. The bond between human and creature had to be nurtured, cultivated over time. This was not mere taming, it was a partnership. And like any partnership, it was built on mutual respect, on understanding. Still, not every human was convinced. There were those who feared that this deep bond with the planet's monsters was too dangerous. They saw it as a reckless venture, a dangerous game of balancing power with submission. The monsters, though tamed, were still wild. It was a fear that many across the galaxy shared. Could humanity really control these creatures, or would they one day rise up and reclaim their planet? But as more time passed and more creatures were integrated into human society, that fear began to fade. The beasts of Valhallas were not invincible, nor were they mindless. They were intelligent, yes, but they were also part of the natural order of the planet. And in the end, humans had proven that they could coexist with that order, rather than be crushed by it. This new reality became the foundation of humanity's expansion on Valhallis. The Federation, once on the brink of abandoning the planet, now saw it as a jewel in its crown. Valhallis was no longer a death world. It was a place of opportunity, a world where humanity had not only survived but had conquered its most primal fears. And the monsters that once ruled the planet? They had become humanity's greatest allies. The monsters had been tamed, not through force, but through intelligence, empathy, and the unshakable will to adapt. And in this success, humanity had proven something to the galaxy, something that no other species had managed to do. Humans could conquer any world, any challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. The Deathworld had created monsters, but humanity had tamed them, shaped them, and made them an integral part of their future. The rest of the galaxy watched, both awed and terrified, as humanity did the impossible. Humanity's success on Valhallis wasn't just the taming of the beasts, it was the reshaping of an entire world's ecosystem. After decades of careful study, humans discovered that the key to controlling the creatures of Valhallis lay not in dominance, but in creating a symbiotic relationship. The creatures of Valhallis weren't just mindless killers, they were incredibly intelligent, each species driven by deeply ingrained patterns of survival, hunting, and territorial instincts. What they lacked was cooperation, something humanity had mastered long ago. The Federation, through advanced behavioral science and neuroenhancement technology, began introducing methods to communicate with the creatures, slowly, carefully, with an almost reverential patience. The first sign of success came with the taming of the scythe-tailed raptor. This creature, once thought to be a mindless predator, had a complex social structure. The raptor communicated through a combination of body language and low-frequency vocalizations, patterns that humans had learned to interpret. Through a series of specially crafted interfaces, human trainers established a bond with the raptors, leading them to understand basic commands. Over time, these raptors, previously considered the most dangerous and uncontrollable species on Valhallis, became integral to the Federation's operations. They served as scouts, trackers, and even allies in the field, their speed and agility unmatched by any machine. Next came the abyssal leviathans. At first, these massive, aquatic creatures were viewed as pure threats. With their enormous tentacles capable of tearing entire ships apart, they were the stuff of legends, whispered about in hushed tones throughout the galaxy. However, when a team of human biologists discovered a pattern in their migratory behavior, an ancient, predictable rhythm that governed their travels, the Federation realized the possibility of understanding these creatures was not far off. By synthesizing pheromone signals that matched the Leviathan's natural environment, humans were able to communicate with them on a basic level, earning their trust. The Leviathans, in turn, assisted Federation teams in underwater exploration, breaking through the harshest depths of Valhallis oceans to unlock resources that would have otherwise been impossible to access. But the true revolution came when humans began to leverage the monsters of Valhallis in ways no one could have foreseen. The technology developed to tame these creatures wasn't just used to neutralize threats or create new allies. It was used to transform the entire planet. The Federation implemented a vast terraforming program that utilized the creatures themselves as tools. The massive thundermaws, once seen as unstoppable forces of destruction, were enlisted to clear vast stretches of volcanic terrain, their sheer power carving out new pathways for infrastructure. The burrow beasts, with their tunneling abilities, were retasked to stabilize the planet's shifting tectonic plates, reducing the catastrophic earthquakes that had once torn through the surface. Soon, Valhallis became a model for the galaxy, not as a place of death, but as a shining example of how even the most lethal environments could be tamed through understanding and cooperation. The Federation's success on Valhallis had far-reaching consequences, demonstrating not just humanity's ability to conquer adversity, but their unparalleled capacity to transform even the most hostile worlds into habitable, thriving ecosystems. As other species began to visit Valhallis, expecting to find only the monsters they had heard of in fearful legends, they were shocked to witness a different reality. The Skydyrants no longer roamed the skies with unchecked aggression. They patrolled the skies as sentinels, allies in protecting the planet's rapidly growing settlements. The scythe-tailed raptors had become something more than just tools. They were partners, working alongside humans to build a future. The leviathans, once thought to be untamable, were now revered for their role in protecting the seas from invasive predators. Humanity had done more than tame the monsters of Valhallis. They had brought a balance to the planet that no other species could have achieved. And in doing so, they had solidified their place in the galaxy, not just as conquerors, but as guardians of life, life that flourished even in the most inhospitable of places. The Federation's mission, once considered a fool's errand, was now hailed as the most impressive feat of galactic engineering and diplomacy ever achieved. But the true lesson of Valhallis, the secret behind humanity's success, was not in their ability to tame monsters or conquer worlds. It lay in their capacity to see beyond the obvious, to understand that even in the most terrifying, inhospitable places, there were systems that could be understood, even negotiated with. Where others saw destruction, humans saw potential. Where others saw fear, humans saw an opportunity for mutual growth. And as the Federation's fleets left the orbit of Valhallis, its skies no longer echoing with the roar of untamed beasts, the galaxy came to a singular, undeniable conclusion: if humanity could tame the Deathworld, there was nothing they could not do.